ينقص ذلك من آثامهم شيئا. Hadith sahih, rawahu Imam Muslim rahimahullah ta'ala. So it is a hadith that we're going to talk tonight about, that comes to us from Sayyidina Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu, who narrated that Allah's Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, if anyone invites people to the right path, then he or she earns a reward like the rewards of those who follow that person, without their rewards being diminished. So again, somebody is misguided, and God has chosen you to guide that person. After that person is guided with the guidance of God, for sure that person will receive rewards, hasanat, because that person will perform the prayers. All of those rewards that that person is receiving, you are receiving them as well. And imagine how amazing it is for a person who becomes a Muslim and all the sins are being forgiven. Perhaps Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may forgive all of your sins as well. So these are great opportunities for us to also invite the others to this guidance. But the hadith continues, and Prophet ﷺ talks now about the opposite, and that deals with misguidance. He says, and if anyone invites other people to wrongdoing, then he earns a sin, or she earns a sin, like the sins of those who toe his line, willingly or unwillingly, without their sins being reduced. So again, if you are going to play a negative role in affecting the actions of an individual by doing bad stuff, like for example, you drink and you invite that person to drink as well, and you talk about alcohol being something amazing, or you encourage the others to do the same thing that you're doing, even though it's sinful or wrong, and that person is also sinning. You as an individual are receiving not only your sins for doing something wrong, but also the sins of the person who is indulged or engaged in wrongdoings. Therefore, I'm reminded, and this is where the hadith ends, by the way, and I'm reminded by another hadith of Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam, where he stated that the person who introduces something good, man sanna sunnah hasana, the one who not necessarily innovates but brings about into our religion a sunnah, a tradition that was perhaps forgotten. Not like, let's say for example, I advise every one of you and I say, brothers, I see that many of you leave the mosque right away after the prayer is over. How about you don't forget to do the Ayatul Kursi, to recite Ayatul Kursi after every prayer, and Bismillah, you start doing it. Now you are reviving a sunnah in this community right here, right? Or any other sunnah. I just gave you one quick example. But also it can be something positive. This word sunnah, it can be also something, a tradition, a new thing which is positive for the people. You will have not only the reward of you doing it, but you will have the reward of every single person until the Day of Judgment who does that as well. Another example is when Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam says, "Ad-dalu ala al-khayri kafa'ilihi." The one who invites another person, or the one who encourages another person, or the one who inspires another person, whatever the case may be, you become a positive individual in inspiring someone or having someone do something positive. You're considered as you have done it yourself. That's another hadith right there. And these chains of a hadith, when I say chains, I don't mean like the riwayats, but I'm talking about the chains like the number There are numerous hadiths that talk about a person either continuously receiving the rewards or continuously receiving the bad deeds. Once he or she. Let's move to the next hadith, and then we're gonna call it a night with this last hadith. And this is a very short hadith, familiar as well. وعن أبي هريرة رضي الله تعالى عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم بدأ الإسلام غريبا وسيعود كما بدأ فطوبى للغرباء. Hadith Sahih, rawahu Imam Muslim rahimahullah. And this hadith is as well from Sayyidina Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, the one who narrates most of the hadith of Nabi alayhi salatu salam. He states that Nabi alayhi salatu salam said, Islam began as obscurity. Obscurity is as something strange. And I'll explain a little bit about that word right there. And will return to how it began. And again, will return to how it began. So blessed are those few who فَطُوبَى لِلْغُرَبَى. Alright. What does it mean that Islam started as something obscurity or as something strange, if we may be more straightforward translating that word, gharib? Well, calling people to believe in the oneness of God was really something strange in a society where everybody was worshipping idols. Calling for brotherhood and calling for decency and calling for other essential points of our religion back in those days used to be foreign to so many people. And they are foreign to many people nowadays as well. Maybe not the whole world, but to many other societies that don't go by religion at all. Some people will say, well, everybody is familiar with the worship in one God, and there are millions and millions of people who follow that way of worship. Not only Muslims, but there are some others as well who claim the same thing, monotheism. Right, at this day it may seem normal, but back in the days it was something really strange. And being a Muslim was definitely something very strange. That's why they were persecuted, that's why they were being murdered, that's why they were being exiled all over the place when it started. And that was not the case only with Muslims, but other religions as well. We see the same thing during the time of Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam. And we see Sayyidina Musa with Bani Israel being followed by Pharaoh and the army and all of that. Why? Because he was calling into righteousness. He was calling people to the belief of one God. Alright. So Islam, we understand now the beginning of this hadith that says that بدأ الإسلام غريبا. Islam began as something strange or obscurity. وسيعود كما بدأ غريبا. And it will come back again to be seen as something strange. Look at the Muslims nowadays, right? Especially in the Western world, in places where Islam is not present, or in places where Islam has put the roots, or is putting the foundations to stay for centuries and centuries, inshallah, in the Western world. Look at the way how they look at us. When I say they, I don't mean everybody, but there are a lot of people out there who look at us as strangers. We are the strangers. We are the ghuraba. Why? Because we call in the oneness of our God. We call against drugs. We call against alcohol. We call against illicit relations. We call against so many other things that people out there have adopted, and they consider them to be accepted in society. and they're not ashamed of those things, but we are still standing for those principles. Our women, they go out there with a hijab on. That is seen as something strange. No matter how much we are penetrating through the politics here and through community work, social work, civic engagement, and you name it, but still we're being looked at, seen as strangers. Even when we get involved with many other associations, many other organizations out there to do something good for everybody, to help the others who are in need, regardless of their religion, we are still viewed or seen as strangers. Not only by average people out there, but sometimes even by faith leaders. They don't trust. They have no trust in us. No matter how good they see from us, they still have no trust. We're still being seen as strangers. But as long as we do what is right, and as long as we believe in God, and we do whatever we do with sincerity, we are very happy, and we will be patient against anything that this society throws at us, against all of these obstacles that we are facing on a daily basis. So what? We are strangers. We accept that fact. Because the Nabi ﷺ in his hadith, he says, you will be strangers. Islam will be strange. And that's how it's being viewed. And I am sure that as we approach closer and closer to the Day of Judgment, we're going to be seen more strangers and strangers. And Islam will be viewed as a strange thing more and more as we approach the Day of Judgment. The last part of this one, so blessed are those few who are different, who are seen as strangers. So don't be afraid. As Prophet ﷺ is saying, don't be afraid if you look strange. If you carry with you principles, ideals, values that may seem strange in society. And unfortunately, the society that we live in and many other places around the world, they used to uphold to so many of our values that we have in our religion. But because the countries and these places, they have drifted away from those values that we still keep, we are still seen as strangers. As I said, because the world is going, is being stripped away from morals and from values. But we're still preserving. And of course, some other traditions out there are preserving certain values and principles as well. But Prophet is informing us about feeling comfortable regardless of the situation, the time, and the place that we live in. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shower with His peace and blessings our beloved and respected Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, who mentioned these golden words. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا